The way you grabbed my pen? Don't swallow them."
"I might make that mistake once," Fred said, "but not twice."
As they slipped into the elevator, Fred paused by the guard's belt, and the keys vanished without so much as a jingle. He sailed into them.
"How was that?"
"Great! Quick, Nita, close the door!" She punched one of the elevator buttons, and the doors slid shut. The keys appeared again, and Kit caught them in midair before they fell. "It's always one of these round ones, like they use on coin phones," he said, going through the keys. "Fred, I didn't know you could make live things."
"I didn't know either," Fred said, sounding unsettled, "and I'm not sure I like it."
"Here we go," Kit said, and put one key into the elevator lock, turning it to run, and then pressed the button marked 73, Restaurant, Helipad. The elevator took off in a hurry. Nita swallowed repeatedly to pop her ears. "Aren't you going to have to change the spells a little to compensate for the gate being up high now?" she said after a moment. "A little. You just put in the new height coordinate. Whoops!" The elevator began to slow down quickly, and Nita's stomach churned for a moment. She and Kit both pressed themselves against the sides of the elevator so they wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone who might happen to be standing right outside the door. But when the doors slid open, no one was there. They peered out and saw a long, carpeted corridor with a plate-glass door at one end. Through it they saw tables and chairs and, more dimly, through a window, a hazy view of the East Side skyline. A muffled sound of plates and silverware being handled came down the hall to them. "It's early for lunch," Nita said, relieved. "Let's go before someone sees us." "What about these keys?" "Look, let's leave them in the elevator lock. That way the guard downstairs will just think he left them there. If they discover they're missing, they'll start looking for whoever took them, and this would be the first place they'd look." "Yeah, but how are we going to get down?" "We'll walk on air," Kit said, his voice teasing. Nita rolled her eyes at the ceiling. "Or we'll go down with the people coming out from lunch if that doesn't work. Let's just get out of here first, okay? Which way do we go to get up on the heliport?" "Left. There are stairs." They slipped out of the elevator just as it chimed and its doors shut again. Probably the guard had called it from downstairs. The corridor off to the left was featureless except for one door at its very end. Helipad Access, the door said in large red letters. Nita tried the knob and let her hand fall in exasperation. Locked. Crud. "Well, wait a moment," Kit said, and tried the knob himself. "You don't really want to be locked, do you?" he said aloud in the speech, very quietly. Again, Nita was amazed by how natural the wizard's language sounded when you heard it, and how nice it was to hear, as if, after being lost in a foreign country for a long time, someone should suddenly speak warmly to you in English. "You've been locked for a couple of days now," Kit went on, his voice friendly and persuasive, not casting a spell, just talking, though in the speech the two were often dangerously close. "It must be pretty dull being locked, no one using you, no one paying any attention. Now, we need to use you, at least a couple of times this morning, so we thought we'd ask." said the lock, and the knob turned in Kit's hand. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be back later." He went through the door into the stairwell, Nita and Fred following, and as the door swung to behind them and locked itself again, there was a decidedly friendly sound to the click. Kit grinned triumphantly at Nita as they climbed the stairs. "How about that?" "Not bad," Nita said, determined to learn how to do it herself, if possible. "You've been practicing, too." "Not really. Some of this stuff just seems to come naturally as you work it more. My mother locked herself out of the car at the supermarket last week, and I was pulling on the car door and talking at it. You know how you do when you're trying to get something to work. And then it worked. I almost fell over. The door came open so fast. It's the speech that does it, I think. Everything loves to hear it. Remember what Carl said, though." "I know. I won't overdo it. You think we ought to call him later? Let him know what happened to the gate?" They came to the top of the stairs, paused before the next closed door, breathing hard from the exertion of climbing the stairs fast. "Probably he knows, if he's looked at his book this morning," Nita said. "Look, before we do anything else, Let's set the time slide. This is a good place for it. We're out of sight. When we're tired of running around the city, we can just activate it and we'll be back here at 11:15. Then we just go downstairs into Grand Central and downstairs to the shuttle and then home in time for lunch. Sounds good. They began rummaging in their backpacks and before too long had produced the 8.5 sugar cubes, the lithium-cadmium battery, a fat one, bigger than a D-cell and far heavier, a specific integrated circuit chip salvaged from the innards of a dead pocket calculator, and the handle of a broken glass teacup. You might want to back away a little, Fred, so your emissions don't interfere with the spell, Kit said. Right. Fred retreated high up into one ceiling corner of the stairwell, flaring bright with interest. All right, Kit said, thumbing through his manual to a page marked with a bit of ripped-up newspaper. Here we go. This is a time slide inauguration, he said aloud in the speech. Claudication type Messar Gimel 26. Authorization group. Nita swallowed, feeling the strangeness set in as it had during their first spell together, feeling the walls lean in to listen. But it was not a silence that fell this time. As Kit spoke, Nita became aware of a roaring away at the edge of her hearing and a blurring at the limits of her vision. Both effects grew and strengthened to the overwhelming point almost before she realized what was happening. And then it was too late. She was seeing and hearing everything that would happen for miles and miles around at 11:15, as if the building were transparent, as if she had eyes that could pierce stone and ears that could hear a leaf fall blocks away. The words and thoughts of a million minds poured down on her in a roaring onslaught like a wave crashing down on a swimmer, and she was washed away, helpless. Too many sights, commonplace and strange, glad and frightening, jostled and crowded all around her, and squeezing her eyes shut made no difference. The sights were in her mind. I'll go crazy! I'll go crazy! Stop it! But she was caught in the spell and couldn't budge. Stop it! Oh, let it stop! It stopped. She was staring at the floor between her and Kit, as she had been doing when the flood of feelings swept over her. Everything was the same as it had been, except that the sugar was gone. Kit was looking at her in concern. You all right? He said. You look a little green. Yeah. Nita rubbed her head, which ached slightly, as if with the memory of a very loud sound. What happened to the sugar? It went away. That means the spell took. Kit began gathering up the rest of the materials and stowing them. He looked at her again. Are you sure you're okay? Yeah, I'm fine. She got up, looked around restlessly. Come on, let's go. Kit got up too, shrugging into his backpack. Yeah, which way is the... Crack! Went something against the door outside, and Nita's insides constricted. She and Kit both threw themselves against the wall behind the door, where they would be hidden if it opened. For a few seconds, neither of them dared to breathe. Nothing happened. What was that? Kit asked. I don't know. It sounded like a shot. Lord, Kit, what if there's somebody up here with a gun or something? What's a gun? Fred said. You don't want to know, Kit said. Then again, if there was somebody out there with a gun, I doubt they could hurt you. Fred, would you go out there and have a quick look around? See who's there? Why not? Fred floated down from the ceiling, looked the door over, put his light out, and slipped through the keyhole. For a little while there was silence, broken only by the faint, faraway rattle of a helicopter going by, blocks away. Then the lock glowed a little from inside, and Fred popped back in. I don't see anyone out there, he said. Kit looked at Nita. Then what made that noise? She was as puzzled as he was. She shrugged. Well, if Fred says there's nothing out there, I suppose. Well, let's keep our eyes open. Kit coaxed the door open as he had the first one, and the three of them stepped cautiously out onto the roof. Most of it was occupied by the helipad proper, the long, wide expanse of bare tarmac ornamented with its big yellow square and H symbol and surrounded by blue, low-intensity landing lights. At one end of the oblong pad was a small glass-walled building decorated with the Pan Am logo, a distended orange windsock, and an anemometer, its 3 little cups spinning energetically in the brisk morning wind. Beyond the helipad, the roof was graveled, and various low-set ventilator stacks poked up here and there. A yard-high guardrail edged the roof. Rising up on all sides was Manhattan, a stony forest of buildings in all shapes and heights. To the west glimmered the Hudson River and the Palisades on the New Jersey side. On the other side of the building lay the East River and Brooklyn and Queens, veiled in mist and pinkish smog. The sun would have felt warm if the wind had stopped blowing. No one was up there at all. Nita took a few steps off the paved walkway that led to the little glass building and scuffed at the gravel suspiciously. "This wind is pretty stiff," she said. "Maybe a good gust of it caught some of this gravel and threw it at the door." But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. "Maybe," Kit said. His voice made it plain that he didn't believe it either. "Come on, let's find a gate." "That side," Nita said, pointing south where the building was wider. They headed toward the railing together, crunching across the gravel. Fred perched on Nita's shoulder. She looked at him with affection. "Worried?" "No, but you are." "A little. That sound shook me up." She paused again, wondering if she heard something behind her. She turned. Nothing. The roof was bare. But still... Nita turned back and hurried to catch up with Kit, who was looking back at her. "Something?" "I don't know. I doubt it. You know how you see things out of the corner of your eye, movements that aren't there? I thought maybe the door moved a little." "I don't know about you," Kit said, "but I'm not going to turn my back on anything while I'm up here. Fred, keep your eyes open." Kit paused by the railing, examining the ledge below it, maybe 6 feet wide, then looked up again. "On second thought, do you have eyes?" "I don't know," Fred said, confused but courteous as always. "Do you have Calicere?" "Good question," Nita said, a touch nervously. "Kit, let's do this and get out of here." He nodded, unslung his pack, and laid the aspirin, pine cone, and fork on the gravel by the railing. Nita got out the Rowan wand and dropped it with the other materials, while Kit went through his book again, stopping at another marked spot. "Okay," he said after a moment. "This is an imaging and patency spell for a temporal-spatial claudication, Aztec class. Purpose? Retrieval of an accidentally internalized object. Matter-energy quotient." Kit read a long string of syllables, a description of Nita's pen in the speech, followed by another symbol group that meant Fred and described the properties of the little personal world gate that kept his great mass at a great distance. Nita held her breath, waiting for another onslaught of uncanny feelings, but none ensued. When Kit stopped reading and the spell turned her loose, it was almost a surprise to see, hanging there in the air, the thing they had been looking for. Puckered, roughly oblong, vaguely radiant, an 8-foot scar on the sky. The World Gate, about 100 feet out from the edge where they stood, and maybe 30 feet below the heliport level. "Well," Kit said then, sounding very pleased with himself, "there we are. And it looks all right. Not much different from the description in the book. Now all we have to do is get to it." Nita picked up the Rowan wand, which for the second part of the spell would serve as a key to get the pen through the World Gate and out of Fred. She tucked the wand into her belt, leaned on the railing, and looked out at the air. According to the wizard's manual, air, like the other elements, had a memory, and could be convinced in the speech to revert to something it had been before. It was this memory of being locked in stone as oxides or nitrates, or frozen solid in the deeps of space, that made the air harden briefly for the shielding spell. Nita started that spell in its simplest form, and then went on into a more formal one, as much a reminiscence as a convincing. She talked to the air about the old days, when starlight wouldn't twinkle because there was nothing to make it do so, and when every shadow was sharp as a razor, and distances didn't look distant because there was no air to soften them.